I love your movie. I have seen it a few times now, I will admit. Um, there is a whimsy to it and a somberness to it that when they sort of collide, I think is really sort of beautiful. And I was not expecting to have it be on my mind so much. So thank you for taking the time to speak to me.
Well, well, thank you for those kind words.
Yeah,
That's
that's
very
a lovely
nice,
comment.
nice to hear.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. So the first time that I watched it, I had sort of forgotten at the very beginning it said like this is a true story. And then I was like, I thought to myself, like, how is this a true story? I was like,
Yeah.
how? And so I was doing a little bit of research and I was sort of like my mind was a little blown about this story. And I think what the film does so beautifully is it sort of encapsulates the events of something that happens in a very poetic way. And I guess I was curious when you read the story of Charlie Mayers,
That's right.
what sort of stuck out to you, or how did that sort of like inhabit your brain that made you both want to tell the story in this medium?
Well, I think we had a similar reaction. Our minds were blown, and you can't even conceive that such a thing is possible. That a
Mm-hmm.
guy could be picked up and thrown upwards of 2 kilometers and come out. I mean, he probably had some cuts and bruises, but he came out relatively unscathed, as far as we know. Because there's not
Mm-hmm.
that much known about him, and it's a captivating thought. But
Mm-hmm.
what really got us was wondering what that trip was like for him, what it was like to
Mm-hmm.
be on that. It must have been about 5 seconds on that 5 second voyage. What did he see? What did he hear?
Mm-hmm.
So we thought that was a great jumping off point.
Okay. Yeah, I thought to myself when I realized that what happened to him, I was like, I like hurt myself like walking down the stairs, and I can't imagine like
But
being like
even
hurled.
even a small mishap like falling downstairs or tripping or something like that,
Yeah.
those moments are kind of crystallized in our minds. I mean, I don't know if you
Yeah.
experience that. If you wipe out or something, there is a kind of a slow motion thing about
Mm-hmm.
it where, and you do, sometimes your eyes are fixed on something and you will remember that, or you'll hear something, or I think it's something to do with a state of shock or something. But near-death experiences are really interesting to read about, and there are a lot of accounts out there to read, and they're
Mm-hmm.
they're all very similar, and people do report always the slowing of time, and they
Oh,
remember
wow.
things. There was one Swiss, what was he? He was a Swiss geologist,
Geologist,
I
yeah.
think, who was one of the first people to ever compile near-death accounts, and he had one himself because he was a mountain climber, and he did a really significant fall.
60, 70
Yeah,
feet, something like that.
yeah,
Oh,
and
wow.
he actually remembers thinking, I'm going to have to remove my glasses so that they don't smash and blind me on the way. I mean, he's
As he's on his way down.
as he's on his way down,
Yeah.
he's thinking those things, and he thought about his wife, and he thought about
Mm.
loved ones, and people really do report going through sort of fear, and then there is a state of bliss or peace that comes out, maybe not in every case, but some people report that feeling of your body becoming seamless with the universe, or losing a sense of a physical self. And this is
Mm.
more coming from people who are dying more slowly rather than maybe a fall, but um, it it's really quite a lovely experience, and people often report,
Yeah.
it sort of seemed like the better option at that moment.
For
Then,
him, yeah,
and
especially.
going back to life is sometimes the more painful route, but it's in the end probably the better.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of like one of the last, I mean, I think it is the last moment of the movie, like the sort of floating amongst everything. And I remember like the second time that I watched it, I realized when he was coming back towards the earth, I didn't notice it the first time the cloud of the explosion.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
feel like, and I was just like, oh no, don't go back to that. I was just like, it's such a beautiful, like almost ethereal experience where you are.
And then, yeah, and then he goes back to hell. That was another thing that we really wanted to capture when you were talking about falling down the stairs, and then Wendy
mhm,
said about how things are crystallized. You know how you hit the ground really hard. You have a very strong memory of that, and that was another part we wanted to catch, was the kind of brutal physicality in that first part when he's sort of
mm,
tumbling arse over tea kettle, and
yeah.
you see bits of things, and we wanted it to be painful and grinding, a grinding
Mhm,
experience. And the same thing on the way down, where you're thinking, oh, ouch, and
yeah.
smack.
This is so funny that you say that. For some reason, I remember when I was young, I don't know why this memory is stuck in my brain, but I remember once I was visiting my grandmother's house and I was like 10, 11, and I remember I actually fell down the stairs. And
Yes.
it was the first time that I remember like feeling the wind knocked out of me.
Oh,
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah.
that and that's like a really horrible, like confusing, alarming
Yeah.
feeling. And I thought of that experience when I was
Oh,
watching
did
the
you?
play. Oh yeah, it was like this weird, odd sense memory
Oh,
thing
interesting.
yeah.
That's
Um,
great. Sort
um,
of great.
I sort of wanted to know if you could tell me how difficult it is to sort of balance like beauty of movement, because I read that an inspiration for you both was like a ballet. And I was wondering how difficult it is to sort of juxtapose like a beauty of movement with this sort of really horrible, like, violent explosion, because I was really sort of struck by the image of him floating on one plane, and then underneath it, there's a shot of all of the destruction underneath him is really terrifying when you sort of see it like that. And I was wondering how hard it is to sort of put those two together.
That image was our central image, I
Yeah.
think, that
Oh
inspired
yeah.
us. Even when we first heard the true story 20 years ago,
Mhm.
when we were in Halifax and at a museum, and we just read the very short blurb about Charlie Mayers, and it stuck with us all this time. And it was because it has that combination um, of horror, catastrophe, and potential for that kind of beauty. And I think we're attracted to that. I think that
Mm.
Like the contradictions.
our previous work seems to do that as well. We did a film called When the Day Breaks, that's about a car accident and the death of a stranger. And there's sort of I don't know, it's a similar kind of meditation. So in a way, it comes naturally to us to be attracted to those contrasts.
Okay.
But we also were, in this one, we were keenly aware that this is a real event, and there are people in Halifax in particular who have relatives who were there, and it still lives pretty large in people's minds. And we
Yeah.
didn't want to be
Mm.
insensitive to that event. And although we take great liberties with some of the details of it, we wanted to be respectful of the lives lost. And I mean, that's partly why we put a lot of the debris that's up there with the sailor as he's flying, like a shoe or a pair of glasses,
A
Mhm.
baby
chair,
carriage,
a baby.
actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are meant to represent all the collateral damage that is very real that's going
Actually,
on.
we shouldn't use that
Yeah.
term collateral
Yeah.
damage. I think that
Right.
George Bush used that. You should
That's
say all
right.
the people who died. We
Mhm.
should.
Right, yes, excuse me. And but we wanted it to be symbolic of that. And also the fish is symbolic of lives lost. But because our real story, or the story that interested us, was the subjective story of the sailor, of that near-death experience. So we were aware that we were kind of doing a balance between the two, and that also we did find the idea of this kind of pink naked man flailing balletically. I mean, there's something inherently funny about it too, and there are funny moments, and we always want to do that. I mean, our films are not slap your knee funny, but we find humor too in some of these situations. We hope that that comes across as well. But
Yeah.
That was it was the Halifax explosion is kind of, to imagine him flying above the exploding city is a thrillingly awful image. There you have
Mhm.
that conflict of the, oh my God, that's sort of exciting, but
Yeah.
so terrible. And one of the things that we've thought about a lot was this concept of a terrible beauty, where something that is truly awful can also be fantastically beautiful. Just look at the pictures of the Hindenburg going down. It's
Oh yeah.
so beautiful. Or the fire at Notre Dame. You get these
Oh
incredibly
wow.
beautiful, horrible
Mhm.
images,
Mm.
and they have a very particular effect on you. I suppose people
Yeah.
could call it gawking, or what's the other word that you
Rubbernecking?
Rubbernecking.
What do you
something
think?
like that. No, there's a term for morbidly looking at awful things, but
Morbid fascination.
so let's use morbid
Mhm.
fascination. And maybe that is part of it, but there is a beauty in these things, and we just wanted to touch on that without, as Wendy says, being disrespectful.
Yeah, I mean, there is sort of, thinking about the fire at Notre Dame, like that's sort of like one of those images where you can sort of, without even verbalizing it, you can tell it's like you're witnessing like a historic
Yeah. Oh yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like the image of him flying over, like I understand that like sort of visceral, like holy crap, what is going to happen? And I feel like your brain would automatically wonder about falling down or how you would put yourself into that situation. So no, I totally get that. And I think that I think humor does come through. I think, humor is a really great tension breaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Whether it's pointed out or not. Like I think something that is very amusing about the movie is that like the cigarette never comes out of his mouth. I think that is really that made me laugh when both times that I watched it.
We wondered about whether we were going too far with that, but we liked the cigarette as a kind of an incendiary of sorts, that at the beginning it's sort of it's a character device for him, that he's kind of, oh, okay, this boat is on fire, I'm just gonna light a cigarette and watch, because he's kind of a
Yeah.
cruel customer, a bit of a salty sailor. And but then there's sort of a coincidence of the lighting with the fire on the boat. But the whole thing about leaving it lit at the end was partly to cue the viewer that this has really only been a few seconds, because the cigarette hasn't even burnt down.
Yeah.
And it's so, and we don't expect people to necessarily get that, but it was because it's easy to forget that we were always reminding ourselves throughout the thing. We were saying, oh no, wait a minute, this is only a few seconds.
Yeah.
Like we can't have a huge amount of things happening during that time, because it's only a few seconds. And but we were slowing it down, so we had to keep reminding ourselves of that.
Really, the film is about the tragedy of addiction, because that's the only thing that's important to him.
The thing was I watched it with my husband, and before we realized that it was a true story, he got really into watching it, and he was like, maybe you should ask the directors if it has something to do with like the destruction of man. He's doing this to himself and he witnesses this horrible thing. And then I told him, I was like, oh, it's a true story. And he was like, okay, never mind.
That's funny.
And there's even something about like the shape of the match on the dock is almost the same shape as the flame that, like, I love the sound that comes up from the explosions, little like sound that comes up. And it comes up so quickly. I did want to ask about some imagery, if that's okay.
Please do.
I think within the first couple seconds of him like swirling in the air, this sort of almost angelic baby pose that he makes. It reminded me of like, there's that shot from like Sandra Bullock in Gravity where she's curled up in the air, like floating there.
Yeah, right.
It reminded me, there's a very innocent image, and I really love the very brief moment at the beginning with the tremoring boxes of TNT. I think that is a really striking image. I was just curious, like visually, what was something that was very important to you? Because I feel like it's very rich. And I feel like I wrote down like a couple more that I thought were really cool, but the turning in the air like a baby really stuck out to me.
Well, that we certainly, that was a really important moment to us. It was really clear that he needed to go into the fetal position to protect himself psychologically and physically from what he was going through. And it's interesting that what we did was animate a bunch of sequences of him flailing in slow motion in the air, and so they were not set in a particular spot in the film. We monkeyed around with them until we got them in the right spots. But at that moment, it's funny because you watch the film so much when you're making it that it loses its emotional power. But I find quite often I'm affected by that moment. That's the moment I feel really sorry for him. That you just think, this man is in a terrible predicament. This is terrible. And he is, as you say, it's fetal, it's babyish, it's self-protecting. So yeah, I like that moment.
Yeah. I think it's also when there's a particularly a lot of debris coming at him, and it's sort of at the beginning of the launch. And then the TNT, that was I mean, it was sort of funny that the ship truly was loaded with explosives, really packed. Wow. And we were thinking, wow, we have, how often when you're making an animated movie do you have the opportunity to put a big stack of TNT? And so then that sort of cued the we did make the prologue quite cartoony in a way, not over the top, but we did it's a very jaunty thing, that because we wanted the atmosphere to shift very abruptly with the explosion, and to set up the idea that cartoons that present TNT, which we're all used to with Wile E. Coyote, they don't usually end up in anybody dying or even nearly dying, and we always get up again.
Just blackened,
blackened, or so. So that was kind of fun, and we were, as you may have noticed, I mean, this film was the first time we've ever tried working in 3D, 3D CG, and it was an adventure. And we worked with a Maya animator named Billy Dyer, who lives in our town, and although I guess the TNT,
I was going to say,
no, I'm not.
Okay, I was going to say we did the
TNT, but
because that was my first foray into 3D, was making all those boxes wiggle and lighting and all that kind of stuff. It was kind of fun. It took a long time though.
Yeah, so everything was kind of an experiment, but blowing down the city was truly a huge challenge.
Yeah, and we did none of it. We just directed it because it was way beyond our capacity to manage it.
Yeah, I like the sharp turn in the tone, because it sort of, supports the fact that it's obviously very sudden and you wouldn't know what to do in that situation. So I love the jaunty prologue.
Well, the music was a big part of that.
It was also to sort of delineate that thing that happens in almost everybody's life, where there's a before and an after. Something happens and there's a specific moment when your life just turns on its head, and you mark that. You think, oh, if it was only 8 minutes ago when everything was okay. Just changes on a dime, a phone call, a car accident, whatever, something like that.
And then you say, if only.
If only.
If only I hadn't left my house at that time.
Yeah, like wrong place, wrong time. Oh yeah. That's a big thing. I guess one last question before I let you both go. I love the fish at the very end. I love that he's looking at the fish in the eye and they're sort of mimicking each other. And I forgot until I watched it a second time that we very briefly see the fish at the very beginning. And I think that really hits home the sort of I want to say insignificance of us all, but it's sort of just like, I don't know, I think we as human beings, feel like a sort of almost superiority to other creatures or beings or other things. And I feel like that is a really beautiful wordless way of sort of, saying the same thing can affect, two different species in the same way. Like you both might die, you both might live. I don't know. So I guess I wanted to know why that was important to end the film that way.
Do you want to take that one?
Well, thanks for picking
Yeah,
that up,
yeah.
because that was definitely part of our thinking was, the fish represents several things. One, as Wendy said earlier, is the death of many innocents that day, so
yeah.
human and otherwise, but also that this poor fish, all those poor fish were just minding their own business. They have no interaction with the human world, and then suddenly these innocent species are part of the, I guess I'm going to have to say, collateral damage of human activity, and the kind of tragedy of that.
And there was a huge, people witnessed the seeing the bottom of the ocean floor. The tsunami was so great.
Oh my God!
And one thing
really?
we did
Wow.
not animate because
amazing.
it was too much for us, was the water, because there was a lot of water being pushed out of the ocean, and there would have been countless fish. And
But they also, I mean, this is getting a bit technical, but we did look it up, but they have got a little, I think they call it a swim bladder. It's a little air-filled bladder that keeps them upright. And if that bursts, which it does, that's how you can kill fish quite easily, is throw a grenade in the water and multiple fish will come up dead. And so by that impact, millions of fish would have been killed. And it's sad, it's sad. And all of that animal has is its life, just as fundamentally that's all the sailor has is his life. That's the only thing, his only actual possession, and it's taken from him. So that's a little bit of the undercurrent.
and at the end they're kind of equals, as maybe they're both staring each other in the face in the same predicament, and the fish doesn't make it. And maybe at that moment the sailor saying, "You lucky bastard." So I have to get up and put my pants on and face this post-explosion world. But
he has to find a pair of pants.
yeah. But,
Poor guy. Oh wow. Yeah, I sort of felt like if they could talk to each other, I feel like they would both say, "All right, what now? Like what do we do?"
Yeah,
exactly.
And they do have a kind of a transcendent moment together in the air, if you recall, like where they're both turning in the air, so they pass each other there as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I love the movie a lot. I keep coming back to it. I'm glad it's online and people can see it. So I've already pushed it on several people.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And I feel like it reminded me a lot. I feel like there were a lot of movies this year in a variety of races that talk about that deal with animals, that it sort of feels like this goes along with something like, Banshees of Inisherin. There's, the donkey in that. Or I just watched International Contender EO, which I was not ready for that movie.
No, I'm not sure I can do it.
Yeah.
It's really hard, but
the Banshees we found that pretty tough.
Yeah, it's something, I don't know why this year, it reminded me with your film about the perspective of not just the sailor, but also of the fish, and that I felt almost.
I'm glad you thought that. That's nice to hear, because I think we need to be looking at that perspective a lot more.
I do too. Yeah. We affect animals and stuff way more than we should take the blame for, if you will.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Good luck to this season. I wanted to tell you that I was so thrilled when I figured out that you directed Wildlife. Even that movie has a juxtaposition of The Englishman and wanting to be a cowboy. So I think whether the juxtaposition is smaller scale like that, or with a huge explosion dealing with life and what are you going to do, I think you do that very beautifully. So I was very thrilled.
Well, thank you.
Well, good luck to you. Thank you again, and have a good rest of your day.
Well, thanks for these thoughtful questions. It's been really a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, pleasure to speak with you too. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Joey.
Thank you.
Bye.